Islam itself and its writings is not in Judaism, but Judaism is in these two major religions. So therefore, the Jewish writers, using their mythology, injected into the minds of the people all over the world via the religious vehicle, has control of the people's minds all over the world through these various religions. So the people throughout the world today are going around babbling and espousing Jewish thoughts through these various religions.
We've really dealt with how Christianity came about. We've dealt with those steps, basically going up to the Hagia Sophia, when the first Christian church was built in Turkey, which was North Africa.
Correct. Northeast Africa, yeah.
Northeast Africa. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to kind of pick up there, and I'd like to run from there. I want to ask you a question relative to that, though, so we just have a little backdrop in the Sophia. Up until that point, from the Melchite Coptic Christians, who were the creators of this icon image called Jesus Christ, after the Romans were able to infect a temple to create an image in the European godhood, you know, to make an image out of a European and have him placed in a temple along with our, well, I'll let you just briefly scatter over that to the Hagia Sophia, but I want to move quickly because we do have that, but as a backdrop, just give us a quick cursory overview of that.
Well, you have to go through the Ecumenical Council meetings in order to get to the Hagia Sophia.
Right.
Okay. And we're talking about, you have to go into 4 council meetings before you get to the 5th council meeting. Now, during the 5th council meeting, we're talking about the council meeting that's called and known in history as the Council of Constantinople II,
okay.
553. The world's first Christian church was and had been created then, 532, built by Justinian and his wife Theodora in 532 and finished 5 years later, 537. Okay?
Now up until this point, the patriarchs, those who had fashioned more or less Christianity, had been Africans, had they? No?
Africans created everything.
Including Christianity.
Including Christianity. Including the image that we know today as Jesus the Christ. Created everything. They built the Hagia Sophia. They designed it, built it. They were the teachers in that Hagia Sophia church that was also a university for the Europeans. That was the world's first university for the Europeans. That was the center of learning for the Europeans. It started after 532. Okay, there are people who are saying that the Greeks studied with the ancient Egyptians during the time of antiquity. That's not true, because the reason why it's not true, there's never been an institution that has ever come out of Greece during the time of antiquity. That's number one. Number two, the Greeks had no alphabet to write with. So therefore, if you don't have no alphabet, how can you have an institution? Okay. 3, the Greeks were uncivilized, illiterate European savages. Okay, so why would the ancient Egyptians, who are a highly civilized people, and they were used as human instruments to civilize this whole entire world, take some illiterate Greek into their temples to teach them? Okay, but let's go back, and I'm going to work my way up to the Hagia Sophia, but you have to start with the image that we know today as Jesus the Christ. The image that we know today as Jesus the Christ is nothing but the image of the successor of Alexander the Greek, and I'm talking about Ptolemy I Lagi, called Soter. The word S-O-T-E-R means savior. That's what it means, savior. Now that savior, if you in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, I will walk you through the progression of history, and you will see where that savior comes into being when you get to Christ, because they called Jesus Christ the Savior. Okay? So let's go back. So when Alexander died in 323, his army general, Ptolemy I Lagi, called Soter, took over the rule and the control of Egypt. The Europeans knew in order to rule and control Egypt and the ancient Egyptians, they had to be accepted into the ancient Egyptian sacred society. Yes, and be made part of it. That's the only way they could rule. Okay? So they were rejected. So this rejection, with this rejection, Ptolemy began to look for a temple in Egypt to accept him to be represented as a deity in the ancient Egyptian sacred temple, so the Greeks could have some type of input and acceptance into the ancient Egyptian sacred society. And given the respect that the ancient Egyptians gave their deities, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, etc., and other deities that they paid homage to, their ancestors. Okay? Rejected. So what he did, he found a temple in Memphis, Egypt, that took a composite of two of their deities, Osiris and Apis the bull, and put those two together and came out with O-Serapis, the name. And they took that name, O-Serapis or Serapis, and gave it to Ptolemy I Lagi, called Soter, the Savior. And with that name being given to him came the simulation of Osiris, like spirit. You see? So what he did, he tried to say, okay, he went back to the rest of the ancient Egyptian temples, said, now accept me in your temples as one of your gods, or one of your deities.
In other words, they were ruling by might. The military power at this time they had, but they had not the minds of the Africans, and they wanted the Africans to worship them the same as they wanted to be what the Africans were.
You're right. They wanted the same respect that the ancient Egyptian Africans gave their ancestors by way of homage, paying homage. That's what they wanted. Okay, so when this was rejected by the rest of the temples throughout Egypt, Ptolemy I Lagi closed all those temples down, closed them all down, and he confiscated all of those ancient Egyptian divine scrolls that was in those institutions, and he housed those scrolls in the temple in Memphis, Egypt, the temple that made his image supposedly into a deity, okay, which he wanted his image in those temples that he closed down, that rejected him, so the other Greeks could have something of their likeness in those temples.
Correct.
Okay, so once these temples was closed down, the ancient Egyptian divine scroll manuscripts were gathered up and then housed in this temple in Memphis, Egypt. Once those temples were closed down, he did not allow any temples to be built by the ancient Egyptians for the purpose of spiritual fellowship. Okay? So what they did, the ancient Egyptians at that point, the priests and priestesses, they used their homes for spiritual practices and spiritual communications with each other. You see? And they also used the cemetery. that's the place where they buried their martyred dead. You see, so the cemetery became a sacred ceremonial place to go to at certain times to honor their dead who preceded them. You see, so now when Ptolemy III, Eugetes I, the grandson of Ptolemy I Lagi called Sotar, came along, he built a temple in Egypt, in Alexandria, Egypt, called the Serapeum Temple. Okay? And next to that building, the Serapeum Temple in Alexandria, Egypt, he built an annex building next to that. The purpose of that annex building being built next to the Serapeum Temple was he then went into the temple in Memphis, Egypt, and got all of those divine scroll manuscripts of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, and stored them in that annex building. And that annex building today is called the Great Library of Egypt. You see? And then the Europeans today went on and perverted that event that was created by Ptolemy I Lagi called, it was created by Ptolemy III Eugetes I. They're saying that Alexander the Greek had a teacher by the name of Aristotle, which is historically incorrect. Okay, there's never been an Aristotle. There's never been a Plato, the teacher of Aristotle. There's never been a Socrates, the teacher of Plato, supposedly. There's never been a Herodotus. There's never been a Pythagoras. There's never been a Solon.
Now, these are very powerful statements
right.
you're making here. How can you prove it?
I'm going to prove it. There's never been a Homer. Okay? Okay, I'm going to prove that. But let me go back to this, and I'll come right back to that. This library is known today as the Great Library of Egypt. But what made it the Great Library of Egypt? It's the divine scroll manuscripts of our ancestors' writings in that annex building that made it divine, or made it the Great Library of Egypt. You see? Now, the reason why I'm saying that there's never been any Greeks living on earth by the name of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus, Homer, Solon, and Pythagoras, any of those Greek names never existed. Simply because the Greeks did not have an alphabet. See?
They could still have names like that.
Well, this is okay. I'm not disputing the names. The name, you can have a name, but you still can't write. People can speak a language. You know, people that can speak a language, they sign an X with their name, for their signature. See? So the Greeks could talk, and the reason why I'm saying that the Greeks, that these Greek names never existed, the question that Walter Williams asked is that if you're going to insist that Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus, Homer, etc. existed, that I'm not telling the truth, then I ask one question. What alphabet did these Greek names use? Because the Greeks had no alphabet.
All right, what period did they exist? What period are we talking about they existed in?
You're talking about Socrates supposed to have existed in the 6th century. Supposed to have been a teacher of Aristotle. Supposed to have been a teacher of Plato. Plato was supposed to have existed in the 6th century also. Aristotle was supposed to have been existed in the 4th century.
BC.
Yeah, okay, in 5th century, up in that area, you see. So what I'm saying, and Herodotus is supposed to have come before that. See, because he was supposed to have been over there before the Greeks got there. That's how they tell and teach the story today. You see? So what I'm saying is that the question I ask, how can these Greek names exist or in human form when the Greeks had no alphabet to write with? They said that Aristotle, the supposed teacher of Alexander the Greek, wrote hundreds of books, and that Alexander the Greek built this great library in Egypt and housed his books. They said that Herodotus wrote a history of Egypt, okay, I asked, well, what alphabet? The Greeks had no alphabet, okay, to write with. See? So, and the reason why I'm saying that is this, and it's very plain. The ancient Egyptians during the time of antiquity were the only literate people on planet Earth. No other race of people throughout the world could read or write. The ancient Egyptians had 3 forms of writing. All you have to do is go to this Rosetta Stone. And the only thing that I use the Rosetta Stone for is to show the 3 alphabets of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, such as the Meta-Neter hieroglyphic. And the middle alphabet I call the phonetic 1, and they call it the hieratic demotic, European. And the third alphabet I call the phonetic 2. See? And once an alphabet has been invented, you can only invent an alphabet one time. That's it. Cannot be invented no more. It's like the chair. The chair can only be invented one time. Now you have different versions of a chair, but a chair is a chair is a chair is a chair. Okay? So now, what happened when the Greeks came in under Alexander the Greek? He forced the Greek language on our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. They in turn learned that language. And by learning that language, they began to write that language by sound. That's what the phonetic alphabet is used for, to write by sounds. Okay? And they began to write that language down. Today, they have taken our ancestors' alphabet and said that's the Greek alphabet. And in essence, the Greeks never had an alphabet. You see? So that's the reason why I repudiate Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus, Homer, and the whole other host of other Greek names prior to Alexander the Greek coming into Egypt. Okay?
And you're right about that, because if there are no institutions, you can't have the grammatic structures, because you have to learn all that in the institution. These things are built around generations, really, of learning and academia. So, and they have to be housed in an institution. That's not something that is that one person learns. It's taught in a community that does not have writing or does not have institutions. So I agree with that. Okay, so please continue.
To prove my second point why the Greeks had no alphabet is that when Ptolemy one Lagi called Sota did not get his image accepted into the ancient Egyptian sacred society, what did he do? He closed those institutions down. You see? So if the Greeks came out of a civilization and a culture that had institutions, he would first thing have respect for institutions, because that's where your learning comes from for your civilization and culture. You see? So he would never close down an institution. That's just like a person destroying books. If you are an avid reader, if you know the value of books, you will never destroy a book because you know the value of it. But if you're ignorant of literature and learning and higher learning, you may do anything. So that's my second reason why the Greeks names such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus, Homer, etc. never existed. You see? Now, let's go back. In 391, there was a Coptic Egyptian member of the exterior Coptic religious community. Okay? And religious community, I'm using that term in my book simply because they held on, even though the Greeks closed their temples down, etc., and cut off their culture, etc., that they still held on to paying homage to their ancestors, such as Osiris, Isis, Horus, etc. Okay? So, there was a individual who was a Melkite Coptic Egyptian. And a Melkite Coptic Egyptian is an individual that is a bourgeois. Like you have bourgeois Negroes in our society, such as Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. But those people, as an example, they are with the system. Okay? They are not grassroots. Okay? So this individual by the name of...
And will serve the interests.
Correct.
They tie their interests in with the interests of the system.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. So here you come, Theophilus, the same way. He burned the Serapeum temple down, destroyed all those manuscripts of his ancestors and our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. Okay? To make way for this image that we know today as Jesus the Christ. Because ever since 320, the exterior Coptic community refused to worship this image of Serapis.
Ever since 320?
Ever since 320, when it was created. Because see, every Ptolemy and every which Ptolemy
320 BC.
Right, 320 BC. Every Ptolemy ruler, Ptolemy means a Greek ruler of Egypt, and Roman ruler, sat on the throne to rule Egypt, and was the vicar of Serapis, just like the Pope sitting in Rome, sits on his throne. He's the vicar of Christ. So these Ptolemaic and Roman rulers are now sitting on the throne, ruling Egypt as the vicar of Serapis. You see?
So are you saying that in those days, the ruler had to have spiritual acceptance, a spiritual power? It could not be just military might?
No, I'm not saying that. Europeans don't have anything spiritual about them. Okay? So, no, they sit up there. It was a political move. Okay, number one, it was a controlling move. Number two, that they wanted the exterior Coptic community to worship them or accept them. Okay? So they can now be on equal terms with their deities, such as Osiris.
Okay.
You see? So that was rejected. See? So Theophilus burned down the great library of Egypt and the Serapeum temple. And the temple, another temple that Ptolemy III, Eugetes I, built in Canopus, Egypt. It was a temple of Canopus. Burned it down. Okay? Etc., etc. Now, 391. Here comes, we're going to come up to the time of, Arias. Okay?
What period is that?
We're talking about the 4th century.
All right.
We're still in the 4th century. But see,
AD.
I don't use that term, I use ABCE. Okay. But it equally, it means AD if you want to use that term. We're talking about 319. That date I'm giving as the time of Theophilus. Okay, 391. Okay. Now we're going to go up to the time of Arias, before Theophilus. Okay, and during that time, we're talking about the time of Arias. Okay. 319. Now, prior to and during the time of Arias, you had 3 events that led up to the creation and the bringing forth the first ecumenical council called the Nicene Council 325, or the Nicene Homogeous Council 325, same thing. Okay? Arius said that this image that we know today as Jesus Christ, then known as Serapis, was a created creature, dissimilar from the Father being Osiris. Okay? A perfect creature, but a creature nevertheless. These are the things that, one of the things that caused that Nicene Council to come about. Then the Donatist schismatic controversy was there. Okay? The Donatist schismatic controversy is a North African schism among the Africans themselves. You see? And that schism came about when one of the members, Bishop Mansurius, turned over sacred writings to Diocletian.
Who is it?
Who's that?
Diocletian.
It's the Roman ruler.
Okay.
Okay? He turned it over. And the other people in the community, such as Donatists and Bishop Secundus, said that he should have martyred himself like his predecessors before him, instead of turning those documents over. And that caused a schism, saying that this Mansurius was not fit to receive or give sanctity, that he sinned, and the exterior Coptic religious community did not accept sinners in their society. Okay.
The documents that he turned over, these were sacred documents of the church, so they had to have, what were they about in terms?
They were sacred writings within that community. Okay? And they did not want those documents turned over to a European, no matter whether he was a ruler or not. Okay? So that's what the fight was all about, or the squabble was all about. That caused a weakness there. Okay? And a split there. That's just like in Chicago during the time of Harold Washington. Our African community in Chicago were unified, 100 plus behind Harold Washington. When he died, white folks threw two factions in that community to run for mayor. See?
Two black factions.
Right. Two African candidates. Knowing that they will split our community and make it weak. And that it did. And then right in the middle of that weakness came Mayor Richard M. Daley. That's in the mayor now of Chicago. Okay?
Divide and conquer.
Correct. Okay? Now, with this weakness in this community, Constantine seized the opportunity of this weakness of the Donatist schismatic controversy. And he offered and found a member of the Coptic community to give what is known in history as the donation of Constantine. Now, the donation of Constantine was accepted by Sylvester I. You see? And Constantine told Sylvester, said, listen, if you accept my donation I'm going to give you, I want you to do some things. I want you to get the Serapis image that we know today as Jesus Christ accepted by your people. You see, that's just like coming to Alton Maddox in New York. Say, Alton, I'm gonna make you the head HNIC of your community.
All you got to do is
take this white image of Serapis and get your people to accept it. Okay? And the second thing was that Constantine wanted Sylvester to do was to baptize him in the Coptic community, to make him part of that community. He said, if you do that, I'll give you my imperial authority. I will make you the head HNIC, head nigger in charge, if you do this. Okay? And then Sylvester accepted that. And that's where Arias came in. I mentioned prior. When Sylvester did that, Arias said that Serapis was a created creature dissimilar from the Father. The Father being Osiris in the ancient Egyptian divine triad. A perfect creature, but a creature nevertheless. Now, let me go back before we go into this. No, incidentally, this is what caused those three events: the dynastic schismatic controversy, the donation of Constantine, and a strong statement by Arias, it's written in my book, caused the Nicene Council to come about in 325. But let me go back and make a correction. I told you about Theophilus. It wasn't 391, it was 291 that he burned the Serapeum temple down. It was 391.
391 or 291?
I'm sorry, 291. I keep saying 391. It's 291. Okay? And this brings you up to, now I have brought you up to the dynastic schismatic controversy, the donation of Constantine, and a strong statement by Arias. Okay? Because we are modulating in time forward. Okay? Now, what did the Melkite Copts do? Now, Constantine did not convoke that ecumenical council. It was Sylvester I who did that. The Melkite African Coptic Egyptian. Okay? He did that. Why? He had to, see, Constantine had no authority to do that. Because he had given his imperial power over that community to Sylvester I. He couldn't convoke that council meeting. He couldn't bring it about. He had no authority. He was just a member of the Coptic community. You see that? See? So he couldn't bring about or cause that council meeting to come about. He had no authority. He was just a member. You see? So here you have a council meeting going on, 325. And what they did at that council meeting, they took this European image that was known then as Serapis, known today as Jesus the Christ, and took Horus Jr. out of that ancient Egyptian divine triad, took this created creature of Serapis, known today as Jesus the Christ, and inserted it into that triad, next to the Father, Osiris, and the Mother, Isis, thus creating what is known as the homogeneous creed. What is the homogeneous creed? God the Father, Osiris, God the Son, Serapis, known today as Jesus Christ, the same. God the Father, God the Son, the same. That's the homogeneous creed.
Okay, but see, people today are thinking, they're not looking at it historic. When they say God the Father, God the Son, one and the same, they see this as the Father in heaven, you know, just using their terms, the Creator God, and the Son, Jesus Christ, is one and the same, but they are not realizing the historical identification that it was Osiris,
the Father,
this created image,
right? The Son.
Saying this created image and Osiris is one and the same.
Right. That's what the Coptic Egyptian Melkite did. See,
now all of this is black up to this point.
Huh?
These are all Africans.
All Africans
have been in charge
all along. See, because the Europeans are sitting on the sideline, financing and encouraging the Africans to create something that they could worship. See? They were savages. They had nothing, no kind of deities whatsoever. When they came into Egypt, like I said before, they had no deities. They couldn't read or write. They had no alphabet. They were uncivilized. You see? Religion, Christianity, was created for the Europeans. You see? So this was created for them. You see, like, this is what tradition is teaching the religious world today. They're saying that Christianity was around during the time of Constantine, the 4th century. Historically incorrect. The reason why they're basing that on is that they are teaching that a Jesus Christ, walked this earth in human form and died in 30, they use the term AD. See? Died in 30 AD. So they're teaching the believers that this Jesus Christ was a human being, died in 30 AD. So therefore, after the death of Jesus Christ, comes what? Christianity.
Correct.
You see? So they're saying that from 30 AD all the way up to the time of the 4th century of Constantine, that Constantine was not a Christian. The Roman Empire was not a Christian empire, but Constantine was the one that accepted Christianity on his deathbed. That he promised, use the term God, that if God would spare his life from this sickness and death, that he would become a Christian, because he was lying in his bed and he saw a fiery cross. This is how the story goes. Okay? And they said that
with the sword thou shalt conquer.
Correct. With the sword I shall conquer. Okay? And he went into battle. And he won that battle on the Milan Bridge. Okay, this is how the story goes. Okay? So, but then they put in a section in history saying that this Constantine accepted Christianity, and that with Constantine accepting Christianity, Christianity began for the very first time for the Europeans. Historically incorrect. We're talking about the 4th century. In the 4th century.
No, but you were talking about Constantine. Wasn't that the Nicene Council 25th?
That's the 4th century.
Okay, that's the 4th. So 325.
Right. It's 4th century.
Okay, it's the 4th century.
Yeah. So in the 4th century, there was no Christ, no Christianity, and no Christian church. See? So that's all historically incorrect, even though they're teaching that Christianity, Christ, and a church was in existence in the 4th century. No. Then we go up to the second Ecumenical Council, Council of Constantinople I, 381.
But let me ask you just an introduction to society, so we can get a view of the Melkite Coptic community and the general ancient Africans in North Africa under the domination of the Romans of his time in the 4th century. What was the difference between the three segments in how they worship? The general African community, ancient African community, whose temples had been closed down.
You're talking about the ancient Egyptians.
Ancient Egyptians, whose temples had been closed down. What was their paying homage or worship to? The Melkite Coptics, what was their structure? And then the general Roman people who were conquerors and oppressors of North Africa at the time.
Okay, now you take like the first segment, the exterior Coptic community, who had their temples closed down. They were using their homes for spiritual fellowship, like I said before, and the cemetery to honor their martyred dead. That's what they were using.
But they
plus,
were an oppressed community, weren't they?
Yes, but plus they were using and paying and keeping the respect of their ancestors, deity of Osiris, Isis, and Horus.
So that was continued.
That was continued, okay? The Melkite Copts, you see, when Ptolemy I Lagi, the successor of Alexander the Greek, when his image was not accepted into the priest society throughout Egypt, he closed those temples down. But he made it against the law for any Coptic Egyptians to build temples for spiritual worship. See? So the Melkite Copts, who were the Uncle Toms, the bourgeois Uncle Toms, who were on the side of the Greeks, used Greek facilities that the Greeks provided for them. You see? And they were the worshippers of Serapis, the image that we know today as Jesus the Christ. You see? The name was, this Jesus Christ image was named Serapis first. It's all in my book. Okay? And then the third thing, the third answer was, what was the Europeans doing? They were doing nothing. Because they have no spiritual identity to unify themselves under a spiritual guidance. They came into Egypt without any gods or goddesses. They came into Egypt without any alphabet or reading or writing. They came into Egypt without any institutions. They came into Egypt uncivilized savages. You see? So they were waiting. See, Europeans cannot do anything until we do it first. They can't do nothing until we do it first. See, that's the reason why I tell our African community we are the greatest people that has ever walked this earth. Why? Because our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, left us an immortal legacy to be great. Okay? So those three entities were in place.
So then the Africans and this Melkite Coptic community was continuing a spiritual
argument,
community or culture, but they were arguing among themselves because one of them, the Melkite Coptics, had instituted a Eurocentric symbol in which they wanted it to be worshipped as a god.
Correct.
Because it was being used by the Romans.
Correct.
And the Romans themselves were they worshiping or were they continuing? Well, I'm saying it because they didn't have any spiritual. What were they doing?
They were worshiping Serapis.
Oh, so they did worship Serapis.
They worshiped Serapis, but see, they
were being taught, and the overseers or administrators was still an African spiritual
That's correct.
source. So
That's
they
correct.
didn't have the spiritual knowledge. They came to the Africans who set up this image for them.
Correct. And they worshiped that image. See,
and
because
the Africans still organized the structure and carried out whatever ecumenical services were being done.
Correct. Absolutely. Greeks had nothing to do with it. Because, why? Because the donation of Constantine was in the African Melkite Coptic Egyptians community. They had the power and the spiritual power by the way of the donation of Constantine.
Now this is very important because I can begin to see now, because if your learning institutions were still organized or housed within the religious community, and the Africans were still in charge of the religious community, then your learning or your educational or academic communities were still spiritual based and under control of Africans. So whatever knowledge was being taught by Africans out of that institution in which they created, even though they had Serapis in it.
Correct. Absolutely. And see, that what you just said comes with the Hagia Sophia. That's the world's first university and the world's first Christian church.
Okay, continue, and now I can see.
Yeah.
And now I can see what you've been saying is that how they brought the structure of civilization and the first university to the Europeans, because the Europeans had no university.
They had no university.
Continue to develop
Right.
that.
See? So now here you come up to Constantinople II, the Ecumenical Council of Constantinople II. Okay? At that council in 381 in Constantinople, Turkey, was the capital city of the Byzantine Empire. Okay? They called this council meeting, and the first thing that they did was to bring forth the Nicene Homogeneous Creed that was created at the Council of Nicaea I. That creed goes like this: God the Father being Osiris, God the Son, the S-O-N, because they took the S-U-N out of the ancient Egyptian divine triad and put this European image in there, the S-O-N. The Son, the same. God the Father, God the Son, the same. In Christian theology, they teach you that Jesus the Christ is the Son of Man. That's true. Why is it true? Because man created this created creature. See, man can only create a creature. Man cannot create anything with life in it unless he's made it with a female.
Correct.
Okay? So therefore, this is what they brought up. The very first thing that they brought up was to institutionalize the homogeneous Nicene Creed.
Now let me ask you one other thing, which is very important. The participants in that council that we're talking about now, this is what council?
Council of Constantinople II.
All right. Now the participants in that, were they primarily, or were they a majority Africans?
Yeah.
And had the Africans at this time spreaded these institutions throughout northern Africa?
See, they couldn't spread these institutions throughout North Africa. The only way they can do that was the Europeans had to do that for them, because it was against the law for them to build anything, any kind of institution. See, they used the institution that the Europeans, the Greeks and the Romans provided for them. Now, all ecumenical council meetings, Council of Nicaea I, the attendees and the person who called those meetings, those ecumenical councils, were all Africans. Europeans had nothing to do with it because of the donation of Constantine. See, Constantine gave this donation to Sylvester I within his imperial power over that community. And the second stipulation was that he be baptized and made part of that Coptic community, Egyptian community. So therefore, he had no authority. The authority was in the hands, the spiritual authority and the ecumenical authority was in the hands of the Melkite Coptic African Egyptians. So the Council of Nicaea I was called by Sylvester I in 325. And he sent different legates from throughout Africa there at that meeting. You see? And Council of Constantinople I, 381, was called by the Melkite Coptic Egyptian Celestine, who created that council meeting of Constantinople I. You see, all Africans attendees. The European, the rulers, the Byzantine, Greek, Roman rulers, they stayed on the side, just watching. And the polemic went back and forth. At the Council of Constantinople I, 381, the Byzantine emperor overstepped the rules of the donation of Constantine by saying that all exterior Coptic religious community members could no longer assemble anymore, and he began to confiscate their homes. And a Melkite Coptic Egyptian by the name of Ambrose came to him and said, "Hey, you have no authority to do that. You can't confiscate these people's homes. That's against the donation of Constantine. I have the authority not to allow you to do that under the donation of Constantine." And the emperor had to back down and rescind that order and turn those homes back over to the Coptic Egyptian community. You see? Now, we're coming up to the most important council meeting that has ever existed in history. See? Let me go back. The first council meeting, Council of Nicaea I, was called by the Coptic Egyptian Sylvester I, who accepted the donation of Constantine from Constantine. The second council meeting, 381, the Council of Constantinople I, was called by Damasus. I made a statement that it was Celestine. It wasn't Celestine. It was Damasus. Damasus. He then had the donation of Constantine. See, because Sylvester had died. So he was elected to take Sylvester's place, Damasus. So therefore, in 381, he called this council meeting that we know today as Constantinople I. Now, the most important council meeting that has ever existed on planet Earth is called the Council of Ephesus, 431, 5th century, called by Celestine, okay, sending his legate to convoke this council meeting, Cyril. That was his legate's name, Bishop Cyril. He sent him there to conduct this particular council meeting. Why is this council meeting so important? This is the reason why. Now, with Arias saying that the image of Serapis, known today as Jesus the Christ, was a created creature, dissimilar from the Father, which the Father is Osiris in the ancient Egyptian divine triad. A perfect creature, but a creature nevertheless. At that time, that caused Arianism to come into being. And then it went from Arianism developed into monophysitism. See? So now here we
What is Arianism? Just explain for our viewing audience.
Arianism is just what I stated. An individual who said that the Serapis image, known today as Jesus the Christ, because Serapis was transformed into Jesus the Christ. It's all in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity. He was transformed into Jesus the Christ. You see that? And Arias said that this Serapis was a created creature. This created creature of Serapis was given to Sylvester if Sylvester could get the exterior Coptic religious community to accept this image. Like the Greeks were accepting, and the rest of the Uncle Tom, Melkite Coptic Egyptian community. Okay? So Arias says, no, this is a created creature. Dissimilar from the Father. Father being Osiris. You see? A perfect creature, but a creature nevertheless. So with that attitude, in other words, they called him a racist. But they, instead of saying a racist, they said that he was an Arianist. So anybody who agreed with Arias, you know, becomes a racist. You know, anybody who agrees with, let's say, Farrakhan, for instance, becomes anti-Semitic. For instance, that's as a for instance. You see. So now here you come up to the council, the most important council meeting that's ever existed, called the Council of Ephesus, 431 ABCE. Who's in play? The Monophysites under Eutyches, the father of Monophysitism. So now it evolved from Arianism into Monophysitism.
Because these are the people who continue to say that this Christ figure, this Serapis figure, because it wasn't a Christ then.
Right.
But this Serapis figure was man-made.
And had no human nature.
Have a human nature.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. You see?
Good.
Now, in order to have a human nature, one has to be born through the body of a female. Is that correct? You have to be born through the body of a female. If you're not born through the body of a female, you cannot be human.
And they said, we created this creature.
Correct. We did in 320.
It's not born through the body of a woman. It can't be.
Can't be accepted as a deity. Okay, will not recognize it. Only as a creature. A created creature created by man. Man can only create creatures that are spiritless. Can't create anything with life unless you bring forth procreation through the union of the man and the woman. You see? All right, so now here you have Eutyches are saying that this Serapis image that we know today as Jesus Christ had no human nature. And Nestorius, who's also a Coptic African Egyptian, says that the Virgin Mary, now the Virgin Mary is a created creature also. Because what they did, they went into the ancient Egyptian divine triad to get this Serapis image that we know today as Jesus Christ, a human nature, by way of getting this Serapis image a mother. they took Isis out of that divine triad of ancient Egypt. They created a created creature by the name of the Virgin Mary. And Nestorius said that, and they gave this Virgin Mary the title of Theotokos. The word Theotokos means the Mother of God. Nestorius come along and said that the Virgin Mary could not be called or use the title of Theotokos, the Mother of God. Can't be called or use the title of Theotokos. Okay? So this is what brought the Council of Ephesus to come about in 431 to get this image of Serapis, a mother giving this supposed Serapis a human nature, a supposed human nature. Okay? So now, once they took Isis out, creature of the Virgin Mary was inserted with the title of Theotokos. They then amalgamated the two created creatures of the Virgin Mary with the title of Theotokos and the Serapis image. Amalgamated them together in order to give the Serapis image a human nature. You see? And then once this was done, the Melkite Coptic Egyptian speaking Greek says that this is the anointed one, the Christos with the K, the Christ in English. That's what they said. This is now the Christ. That's how you got this Christ. So when people come up to you or me or anybody and says that Christianity was in the 4th century, introduced to Europe by Constantine, like one of our leading scholars said to me the other day, and I won't call that person's name because I love him, and I repudiated what he said, that Constantine introduced Christianity into the European community. And when I repudiated him and told him that in the 4th century where Constantine lived, there was no Christ, no Christianity, and no Christian church, he jumped all over me. Well, this is okay. Well, this is where we come up to the Council of Ephesus, which is the most important council meeting, and you can see why it is the most important council meeting. Because this is council meeting where they made the image of Serapis into Christ. You see, so when I tell people, you do not get a Christ until the 5th century at the Council of Ephesus. Okay? Now, when did Christianity come into being? 20 years later, at the Council of Chalcedon, 451. That's when you get a Christ in Christianity. That's where you get Christ turned into Christianity. You see, at the Council of Chalcedon, 451, where at the Council of Chalcedon was called and convoked by the Coptic Melkite Egyptian by the name of Leo. Okay, he was the African Melkite Copt who had the donation of Constantine, so he had the authority to call it. You see, and that council meeting, the Council of Constantinople, the Council of Chalcedon, that council meeting was called to, let's say, eradicate or the difference over the human nature of this Serapis now known as Christ. They tried to, let's say we're going to have a council meeting one more time. This is the last one we're going to have over the argument whether this Serapis, now Christ, had a human nature or not. And they brought up all kinds of decrees to try to consummate that. Okay, that's in my book also. So at the close of the council meeting of Chalcedon in 451, Christianity began.
Yeah, now, tell me if I'm right. Christianity does not begin cannot exist before the Council of Chalcedon in
451. Correct.
Because it was at that council that they made this image Christ.
No, at the Council of Ephesus, 20 years before that. Prior to that. Council of Ephesus, 431.
431.
Right.
They made the image into Christ.
Of Serapis into Christ.
Into Christ. And they called him Christ. Why did they call him Christ again?
In speaking Greek, it was the anointed one. And the anointed one means Christos. They said, this is now the anointed one, now the Christos, meaning Christ in English. Okay? The Christos. Now, if you go back to the time of Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, Eucharistos. That was part of his title, Eucharist, or Eucharistos, the Eucharist. The Eucharist is what? Giving. That's what the word Eucharist means, to give. See? So that they're saying that this now is the anointed one, the giver, the Eucharist. You see? This is what they're saying. The Eucharistos. So in Coptic Greek, that means Christ. So he was now the Christ, the giver.
What was he giving? Life?
What do they tell the Christians today? That if you believe in Jesus, you have everlasting life. Islam itself and its writings is not in Judaism, but Judaism is in these two major religions. So therefore, the Jewish writers, using their mythology, injected into the minds of the people all over the world via the religious vehicle, has control of the people's minds all over the world through these various religions. So the people throughout the world today are going around babbling and espousing Jewish thoughts through these various religions.
Brother Walter, what I want to do...
You see, at the Council of Chalcedon, 451, where at the Council of Chalcedon was called and convoked by the Coptic Melkite Egyptian by the name of Leo. Okay? He was the African Melkite Cop who had the donation of Constantine. So he had the authority to call it. You see? And that council meeting, the Council of Constantinople, the Council of Chalcedon, that council meeting was called to, let's say, eradicate or the difference over the human nature of this Serapis now known as Christ. They tried to, let's say we're going to have a council meeting one more time. This is the last one we're going to have over the argument whether this Serapis, now Christ, had a human nature or not. And they brought up all kinds of decrees to try to consummate that. Okay, that's in my book also. So at the close of the council meeting of Chalcedon in 451, Christianity began.
Yeah, now, tell me if I'm right. Christianity does not begin, cannot exist before the Council of Chalcedon in 451.
Correct.
Because it was at that council that they made this image Christ.
No, at the Council of Ephesus, 20 years
before.
Prior to that. Council of Ephesus, 431.
431, they made the image into Christ.
Oh, Serapis into Christ.
Into Christ. And they called him Christ. Why did they call him Christ again?
Speaking Greek, it's the anointed one. And the anointed one means Christos. They said this is now the anointed one, now the Christos, meaning Christ in English. Okay? The Christos. Now, if you go back to the time of Ptolemy V Epiphanes, Eucharistos. That was part of his title, Eucharist, or Eucharistos, the Eucharist. The Eucharist is what? Giving. That's what the word Eucharist means, to give. See, so that they're saying that this now is the anointed one, the giver, the Eucharist. You see? This is what they're saying, the Eucharistos. So in Coptic Greek, that means Christ. So he was now the Christ, the giver.
What was he giving? Life?
What do they tell the Christians today? If you believe in Jesus, you have everlasting life. See? This is what they are simulating the sun, the S-U-N, in the ancient Egyptian divine triad. When they took Horus Jr., the S-U-N out and put this creature, created creature, the S-O-N, what we know today is Christ in there. Okay? Then the sun gives life. See? So he became the Eucharistos, or the Eucharist, or the Christ. You see? And today, in Christian theology, they call that Eucharist the consecrated Eucharist. You see, now they got another name attached to Eucharist by saying the consecrated Eucharist. Meaning that now you have the body and the blood of Jesus, or body and the blood of Christ by way of a wafer and wine. You see? But see, all this is happening and being made in the process of history. Had nothing to do with today's theology of how they are teaching you. Because they're not going to tell you all these things I'm telling you. That created this created creature, that created this created man-made religion called Christianity. See? And then you come up to the fifth council meeting, the Council of Constantinople II. Now that was called by a European, Justinian I. He called that in 553. You see? But in the meantime, in 532, he and his wife, Theodora, had built the Serapeum Temple.
The who temple?
The Hagia Sophia.
In 532.
That was the world's first Christian church. In 532, the Hagia Sophia.
Now, who built that church? Who was in?
Justinian I and his wife.
I mean, who physically constructed it?
The Africans. They designed it and they built it. Most beautiful church that was ever built on earth. The Hagia Sophia. It had all those mosaic tiles in it, etc. They were the architect of that. Not only were they the architect of that, they were the faculty. They made up the faculty of that church, and the university became a church and a university. You see, and it's called the Church of the Hagia Sophia. A Church of Hagia Sophia means the Church of the Holy Wisdom.
Now, what did they teach into that, and what was the structure? You said it was the first university. You said Africans built it. You said Africans were in charge. Lay that out for us so we can get a picture of what's going on.
Well, they designed the building. They brought forth the concept. They were the first teachers in the university, and they laid out the formulation of ceremony to be used in that church. Okay, by way of florilegia. The word florilegia means to embellish. In other words, you can take one word and just embellish it, make a sermon out of it. See, homily. See, out of it. You see, so they was the one, and they were also the first. You know, they were the only teachers in that university because they were descendants of the ancient Egyptians, the world's first and oldest and highest and civilized people on planet Earth.
So you're saying that at this time, all through now, it is still the Africans who are the engineers, who are the architects, who are the builders of most of what was going on in North Africa all the way up to Turkey, because Europe, there was still in the 3rd century, still no great building being done anywhere in Europe. I mean, just cover that for us so we can get a picture of really what's going on.
See, you have to go back, you have to realize this. Africans taught the Europeans everything that the Europeans are using today in their society all over the world. Because the ancient Egyptians, the African ancient Egyptians, by being the world's first and oldest civilized people and civilization on earth, and were used by the creator creatures to, as human instruments, to bring forth all civilization throughout the world, they were the ones that were responsible to teach and bring forth all of this learning and spread it among the rest of the people throughout the world. So it wasn't in the hands of the Europeans because they were uncivilized savages. They had no alphabet, they couldn't read or write, they had no institution or anything. So everything that you see, anytime you see a white man or white woman walking down the street today, or a white child doing whatever, it is because of our ancient African ancestors laid the foundation for that individual to do that. Okay? So, in essence, the Europeans brought nothing to civilization. Nothing. The only thing that they brought is death, disease, and destruction. That's all. You can count on that. And war.
So actually now the spiritual community, which is now a Christian community, still African at the Sophia, Hagia.
Hagia Sophia.
Yeah. And they laid out all of the tenets of Christianity. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
They laid out the tenets of Christianity. Right. And they grafted it out of their own spirituality and the wisdom that they already had out of their culture and their history. So much of what they put into Christianity really came out of the original spiritual systems
of the Africans.
Known
to us today as the ancient Egyptians.
But where the danger and the most devastating part of this is that they grafted it onto a European and then fluorigized that European image into a god away from our ancestral deities, and then shifted us into worshiping a European and fluorigizing and God embedding a God image into that European, so that we were moved away from the homage and the oneness of ourselves into the worship of the European. Kind of explain what is going on here so we can see it very clearly, because many people say, well, it's still African, we still did it, but they are not seeing the danger here. Point that out.
The danger is still in existence today. But the danger is that we are still, as a people, worshiping this image, this dead white man on the cross image that's attached to Christianity. That's the danger. The danger is when you do that, then you superimpose on your subconscious mind. And once you superimpose your subconscious mind into this dead white man on the cross and Christianity, that's where the destruction of our people comes, out of ignorance. You see, I heard that all over Ghana, those Africans over there are infested with the belief and the worship of this dead white man on the cross called Christ. You see, that's the danger. You see, when you do that, then you walk away from your ancestors' history, because you don't want to know that. So all you want to do is be with Christ. You want to respect Christ. You want to do what the Christian laws tell you to do. You want to do what your minister, who is an agent for the system, tell you to do. That's destruction. You see? So you laid it out perfectly of how the Melkite Coptic Egyptian using that image of Syracuse, known today as Jesus Christ, using that image to create homilies by way of floralizing these homilies, blowing them up, embellishing them, and passing it on from generation to generation, which laid the foundation for Christianity. Because see, another thing I want to bring out, that Melkite Coptic community and the exterior Coptic community, they practice celibacy. You see, and you see the Church of Hagia Sophia that was created in Northeast Africa in Constantinople, Turkey, was the first seat of Christianity. Wasn't no seat of Christianity in Rome. Wasn't no Vatican in Rome. Okay, even though right after Justinian built those churches, the Europeans began to have different churches over in Europe. Okay, but not like no Hagia Sophia. Okay, they used the Hagia Sophia as a model to try to build churches, other churches throughout Europe. You see, and that's where the bulk of the Christian world was, in Europe at that time. See, now because the Coptic Egyptian community were monophysites. So all over Africa was monophysites. You see? So now, when the Hagia Sophia was built, the African who had the donation of the ecclesiastical authority over that particular church, Vigilius, was an African. See?
But so, the whole setup here was Africans. And that's why I just want to I think this is a good place to interject this. That's why when you look at the Roman Catholics or the Pope or the Vatican today, when you look at the Catholic structure, you'll find that it is basically laid out in an ancient African or ancient Egyptian, Kemetic Egyptian, where the Pope wears the mitre or he wears the crown like the Pharaoh. His dress, everything. is a duplication of what the Africans themselves actually wore and did, because it was structured by Africans in the beginning.
Correct.
And the Europeans took over a system that had been built by Africans.
Correct.
Where Africans infused their own images, I mean not so much images, but their own customs of dress and attire, and the way that they laid out the whole religious ceremony and etc. was done by Africans. So now that it has been taken over by Europeans, we don't even realize that it had an African base. But the problem again was that it was designed for Europeans with their image for them to worship. And it was then, and their God, and this Jesus Christ, which is taught to have actually lived and existed, never existed, was created by Africans themselves.
Melkites.
To give Europeans some spirituality or some godhood that they didn't have, or some spirituality that they didn't have. So we now worship, as you say, the dead Christ that never existed, and forsake the reality of our own ancestors and our own spirituality, killing it, and continuing the worship of what was created in the image of a European, under the hammer or the sword.
And the European institutionalized it, and the minister, your minister at your church every Sunday or all through the week is an agent for that system to keep it in place. He keeps it going. That's the individual.
Now Africans, we're going back to the Sophia Hagia. Africans are still powerful
Correct.
In the spirit of time, more powerful than we realize, because the European has not taken dominance and power no more than in terms of warfare.
Correct. Absolutely. Political power.
Talk about that.
Political power.
But because you have the Byzantine Empire. What are we looking at, and who are we talking about with the Byzantine Empire?
You're talking about Roman rulers. You're talking about Greek Roman rulers.
Byzantine.
Okay. During the Byzantine Empire.
Byzantine.
Right. Okay. But now, what we're going to do is that I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Church of Hagia Sophia.
Please do.
And then we're going to cut and end our segment at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will continue this segment at another date. And when we do, it will be time in history to bring in the origin of what we know today as Islam.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now, here you have the Hagia Sophia, world's first Christian church. No churches in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
The first church on earth that's ever been built as a Christian church. Church of Hagia Sophia means the Church of the Holy Wisdom. Mm-hmm. Another name for Jesus the Christ. Mm-hmm. This church was designed by Africans, built by Africans, with all those beautiful mosaics in there. The Africans set up the religious system.
Now, who were these Africans?
They were Africans that were picked by either the Melkite Coptic community, who had the donation of Constantine
mm-hmm.
As an authority, and some of them were picked by the Greek or Roman ruler. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they could be anybody. Mm-hmm. You see? Now, they created and set up this religious formula for this particular church. Mm-hmm. Okay. That church also became a learning institution for the Europeans, mm-hmm. with the Africans being the faculty of that university and church. Mm-hmm. They taught the Europeans. This is the center of learning in Constantinople, Turkey, at the Hagia Sophia for Europeans, who were then being taught by the Africans. Mm-hmm. See?
What are they being taught?
You teach first you have to teach them how to read and write. Mm-hmm. Okay, taught them how to write. Mm-hmm. They taught them crafts. They taught them medicine. They taught them mathematics. Mm-hmm. They taught them a variety of things. Mm-hmm. You see, it was an institution. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was only for the hand-picked people that were allowed in there. No females was allowed. Mm-hmm. All males. So it wasn't an institute. You only had one institution, so everybody throughout the region couldn't attend that institution. Because you didn't have no airplanes or buses or trains or computers or telephones back then. Mm-hmm. So if you lived over here, you couldn't, it wasn't open for the general public anyway. It was open for hand-picked few. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See? Just like the Roman Catholic Church, their priesthood is not open for everybody. Mm-hmm. They hand-pick the ones that they want to come in and teach to become priests. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now, here you have the center of learning for the Europeans in the Hagia Sophia. Mm-hmm. Okay? And taught by African scholars, etc., etc. And with this teaching in the Hagia Sophia became the first church of Christ. So when the Hagia Sophia, Clemson, was created and built in 532, finished in 537, the first papa, and you can call it a pope, of that church was an African by the name of Vigilius. See, Justinian, even though he built it, he didn't have the authority of the donation of Constantine to head that church. See, Vigilius had that authority. He was an African. He was a Melkite, Coptic, Egyptian African, because he had the donation of Constantine, thereby having ecclesiastical authority. Now, Constantine wanted to take that back from him. So, Theodosius was a lawyer of Justinian, a Melkite Coptic African lawyer, who told Justinian how to take that donation back from Vigilius. Okay? He told him to get Vigilius to denounce the 3 chapters. Now the 3 chapters were inserted at the Council of Chalcedon in 451, written by Melkite Coptic Egyptian priests of that community. Theodoret, and Ibis of Edessa. Those are the 3. In history, you can go to the books and you can look up in the encyclopedia the 3 chapters, especially in the New Catholic Encyclopedia. Look up and find a set of the New Catholic Encyclopedia, and you look up the 3 chapters. That's what they are. They were presented at the Council of Chalcedon against Nestorius. What did Nestorius do 20 years prior? See, the Council of Chalcedon was called to consummate what went on at the Council of Ephesus 20 years prior. What went on 20 years prior before the Council of Chalcedon was that Nestorius refused to recognize and call the Virgin Mary, the created creature, the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos. Theotokos means the Mother of God. So at this 20 years later, at the Council of Chalcedon, they wanted to consummate what went on at Ephesus. Okay? And the 3 bishops who were Melkite issued what is known in history as the 3 chapters. That was issued against, writings against Nestorius for him not accepting the Theotokos of the Virgin Mary. See? So now, Theodosius told Justinian how to take that donation back from Vigilius and the Coptic Melkite Egyptian community. He says, get Vigilius to denounce the 3 chapters, said that they were wrong. The second thing he told him to do, get Vigilius to take up Holy Communion with the Monophysite community. Now, what is the Monophysite community? The Monophysite community, now here Vigilius is a diaphysitic. The word diaphysitic means an individual who believe that this Christ image that we know today has a human nature. That's the whole argument. Whole argument all through this time. See? Was that whether almost 1,000 years was going on. And they're still arguing over the human nature of this Christ image. The whole argument was over the human nature of this Christ. So he told Justinian to make Vigilius take up Holy Communion with the Monophysite community. In other words, pray together. Okay? So now, in other words, become part of the Monophysite community. If Vigilius did that, he would sign his death warrant.
Because the Monophysites would have killed him.
No. Just, you know how white folks are. They entice you to do something, then they come and arrest you. As if you did it. But they entice you to do it.
So are you saying it would have been against the rules or laws of the church to have communion with the Diaphysites?
It's against the
Monophysites?
It's against the laws of the monophysitic. I'm sorry. It's against the laws of the Diaphysitic community. I'm sorry. It's against the laws of the monophysitic community to have communion
with the Diaphysites.
Correct. And vice versa. It's against the laws for the Diaphysites to have any communion with the monophysites, because they then become one. You see, if I'm your enemy and all of a sudden we make up and we pray together, then we are one.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
So Vigilius refused to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So Justinian chased that man all over Africa, and he finally killed him. And that's the only way he took back the donation of Constantine. Mm-hmm. Now, at this time, Justinian he has ecclesiastical authority, and he has political authority over that church. He became, in essence, the world's first European pope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's in essence. Now, let me tell you this, and we're going to end our series here, and we're going to come back another day and pick it up at this point, and this will bring us into Islam.
Mm-hmm.
The church, now this is something that no one has figured it out. Okay? And what I'm about to tell you is going to be in my book,
mm-hmm.
The Historical Origin of Islam.
Mm-hmm. Because
my wife, Arnetta Williams, is writing chapter 9 in this particular book that's coming out in less than a couple of months. Because I got the cover design, everything's all in place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be in there about, her chapter is entitled, What Happened to the Church of Hagia Sophia? What happened to it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See?
Yes.
Okay, which is the first seat of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, in 532, and they built that church, the Hagia Sophia, Justinian and his wife. 537, they finished it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what the date they finished it on? Now, this is something that no one is telling you. They finished it December the 27th, 537. And for 900 years, on that date of December the 27th, they celebrated the birth of Christ. Now, what is Christ? The Hagia Sophia. Because it says the Hagia Sophia means the Church of the Holy Wisdom. This church was built for who? Christ. So when that church was finished, that's the birth date of Christ.
Right.
December 27, 537. So for 900 years, whoever was the emperor, starting with Justinian I, they dressed up and they celebrated. And Justinian gave out all kinds of food to the poor back then. And they had a procession that started from one point, led by the African bishops and the clergy, African clergy of that church, with the Roman emperor walking to that church, and the church door was open. They walked into the church and they began to prostrate themselves in front of this altar of this Christ image.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this is December the 27th. Mm-hmm. Now, when the Hagia Sophia was the first seat of Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they transferred the seat of Christianity into Europe in the 15th century,
mm-hmm.
you see, and they began to build St. Peter's Church, now known as St. Peter's Basilica, in 1445, 15th century. That's when they transferred the seat of Christianity out of Africa mm-hmm. into, on the outskirts of Rome, that we know today as the Vatican, which they built the Vatican over the catacombs.
What year?
1445. That's the beginning of it.
1445.
Right, 15th century.
So the Hagia Sophia remained the seat of Christianity in Turkey up to 1445.
45. Right.
How much is that about?
1445, that's almost 1,000 years.
Almost 1,000 years.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
See?
Now, you haven't mentioned anything about Judaism.
Wait now.
Go ahead.
Wait now. Let me finish this up, then you can answer that question and we'll cut it. Now, people ask me, how did December the 25th come by as the birthday of Christ? Right,
yes.
See?
Yeah.
What's the birth date of Christ? December 27th. 537. But what is Christ now? The church of Hagia Sophia. Church of the Holy Wisdom, the church of Christ. Okay? So when that church was finished, they celebrated the birth of this church, the birth of this Christ. You see?
Yes.
So now, when they transferred it, and they celebrate for 900 years after that. You see? So if you put 537 and a little over 900 years on that, you now come up to 1445 up in that area. Then you come up to the building of St. Peter's Church, where they transferred the seat of Christianity into Europe, into Rome. Okay? Okay? But when they got it over to Rome, with the Gregorian calendar, they lost 2 days. So now it's December 25th they celebrate. Now, nobody else is telling you that. Okay? So now what were you going to say about that?
I just wanted to ask you a few questions. We don't have to go any further on that particular topic, but just as a clarification of the point, you haven't said anything about, I mean, there is the Christ, so the Christ is here. I mean, we haven't called him Jesus yet, and we haven't said anything about him being a Jew or Judaism. Why?
Because it's not, history hasn't brought that forth as yet. See, Christ becomes a Jew in the fourth Gospel of John. In the Bible, of the King James Version of the Bible in 1611, that's where Christ became a Jew. In the fourth Gospel of John.
So there are no Jews right now?
No Jews. You don't get no Jews until the late 11th and the early 12th century, when they formulated under Rashi the formulation of Judaism as a religion. Okay, you don't get no practices. You don't get no Jews until the first practitioners of Jews, until you get the Knights Templars coming along. But that goes into another history.
I know, but it's very important. I just want to put some of this here so that when we go into the next session, we can clear these things away. But there are no Hebrews yet?
No. There's no Bible. You only get a Hebrews in the Bible. That's the only place that you find Hebrews. Outside of the Bible, there's no Hebrews.
Now, see, this is important because as you have laid it out, you can see how this developed. And you can see that there is no Jews yet. There is no Hebrewism yet, because all of these stories have not been invented, and they haven't become the florigizing of the image that is Christ, and the stories that will later be written about him. And that's why this becomes so dangerous to African people today, because as time goes on, people add all of these other stories and make these things come alive even more, and they create images and things that never existed, and we then go and believe in them. And they were written specifically in some cases to control the minds of the people who would believe them, so that people can have power over them. So that's why I wanted, at this point, didn't want to close without you saying something about that.
Right. Well, see, then what you're saying, then they took what you said and institutionalized it. And that's how they keep the control of that of the people through generation and generation and generation, by way of institutionalizing these things that we just got through talking about. So you got to have an institution to sustain these things, to teach it from generation to generation. Without an institution, you can't do that. See, now, like I said before, we're going to go on the next segment. We're going to go into Islam. Okay, you got to have Islam before you have Judaism, even though they teach you a Judeo-Christian relationship. That Jesus Christ was a Jew, so therefore Judaism was the first religion, which is historically incorrect. And that through Judaism and Christianity came Islam, historically incorrect. But we're going to go on that on the next segment. Okay, but the next segment would be on Islam, and that's where you have to go. You can't jump from Christianity to Judaism, because then you're running ahead of time. Judaism is the last of the three major Western religions to come into existence. So we have to use the discipline of history in order to understand what has been taught to us and what we are believing in as a people. And the only way that we can free ourselves from or divest ourselves from these various man-made religions is to understand them through knowledge. And that's what I have to say.
Walter, I want to thank you for being with us today on our story. It is a liberating experience, a mind-freeing experience. And as we go through these segments, if our audience would follow us carefully and keep an open mind, they will find their mind.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.